everybody. Today we're working with commas. How do we use them? I think back in elementary school, you probably heard that whenever you need to take a pause, you add a comma, but it is far more detailed than that. And I've created this little cheat sheet, this little document for us to help us get familiar with commas and the most common ways that we use them. And I will let you in on a little secret. I am a firm believer in the Oxford comma. And I've mentioned that here in my document a little bit. It really helps with clarity in your sentences. And we'll see some examples in a moment. I know that there's a lot of writing here. I've tried my best to highlight the examples in a different color. And we're also going to have some exercise sheets where we can work on our comma usage, and there'll be one of your activities will have to do with comma and punctuation, and it sounds like it could be a little boring, but I really get excited about commas, especially that Oxford comma. So let's take a peek at some of the ways that we use our commas. One of the most common is going to be in a list. My favorite animals are dogs, horses, and guinea pigs. If there are 10 things in a list, you need 9 commas. I find that it's really useful to use that Oxford comma. Some people will think, and I have it here, that you can use that conjunction, that and, to take the place of a comma. My favorite animals are dogs, comma, horses, and guinea pigs. And it's not grammatically incorrect, but it does pose a problem with clarity if you've got items in your list that are already joined. They already have things that they belong with, and then you don't know, were they supposed to be separate? Are they together? And breakfast is easy to use as an example to understand that. I enjoy either pancakes, comma, that's one thing in the list, toast and jam, which is another thing on the list, or bacon and eggs. They all go together. So we have to really be careful that it's not just where there's ands that you put a comma before it. And we have to say, is it one thing in the list? I like horses, comma, dogs, comma, cats, comma, guinea pigs, comma, and hamsters. So it can get a little bit confusing. But when you commit to the Oxford comma, the math is really easy. If I'm just have 3 things in my list, I need 2 commas. If I've got 6 things in my list, I need 5 commas. So there's a little example here in this sentence. And I'm going to have this document up for you. So I know I'm scrolling through it because I don't want to just read to you. You can read on your own. So don't hesitate to, or don't worry that I'm going through this too quickly. So where did the commas go in this sentence? After my breakfast of tea and toast, fruit, and a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, I need to tend to the sheep, cows, and horses. I'm just going to pause for a second and look at you like Dora the Explorer and let you think about where the commas go for a moment before I tell you the answer. After my breakfast of tea and toast, fruit, and a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, I need to tend to the sheep, cows, and horses. All right. After my breakfast of tea and toast. So that looks like it goes together. So tea and toast is one thing. Fruit and a bacon, well, now that doesn't seem to go together. It's not a package deal. So fruit and a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich. So that's a BLT. So it's not a bacon sandwich, and I'm also going to have a lettuce sandwich and a tomato sandwich. They all go together. And a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich. That's all one. So after all of that, I need to tend to the sheep, cows, and horses. So that's a little bit more complicated. So that's one way that we use commas. We'll go back to that again later in our exercises. Commas also modify or describe nouns. So hair, for instance, her long, glossy hair. It's not just long, it's not just glossy, it's long and glossy, and it fell past her shoulders. So 2 descriptors, 1 comma. My feet were sore, bruised, and swollen after walking all day. So my poor feet had 3 descriptors. They were sore, they're bruised, and they're swollen. 3 descriptors, 2 commas. Again, the math works out really well. The third way we use commas is to separate what's called an appositive. I don't use that word daily, even when I'm teaching high school English, but anything that's explaining or identifying that noun. So I used Elon Musk. He's in the news all the time. But maybe my person who I'm speaking to isn't familiar with the new work he's doing. So Elon Musk, now I need to describe him to add further information. So I separate that further information. Elon Musk, comma, the inventor of Tesla, comma, has recently had difficulty with his running of Twitter. The reason I separate it is because this sentence works perfectly well without that identifying piece that I put in there. Elon Musk has recently had difficulty with his running of Twitter. In case you needed more information to remember who Elon Musk is, I've added some. Sorry, I was checking on the recording here and I lost my train of thought. All right, 4. Commas separate dependent and independent clauses. An independent clause is a sentence all on its own. I love Christmas time. I am excited to get my driver's license. Complete sentence. So my example, I adopted a kitten. The subject is me, I. The verb is adopted. And we even get to see in this sentence the object. What did I adopt? The kitten. It could have been replaced with the dog. Could have been replaced with I adopted a philosophy. Dependent clauses don't have one of those elements, whether it's the subject or verb. It doesn't make sense just on its own. After I toured the animal shelter. What? You're left hanging on a ledge. After you toured the animal shelter, what? You applied for a job? You raced off to your next appointment? I don't know what you did. You just left me hanging. So we can put them together though. After I toured the animal shelter, comma, I adopted the kitten. So I'm walking around, I'm touring the shelter, I see this little kitten, I adopted it. I fell in love with it. After I toured the animal shelter, what? I adopted the kitten. A lot of your sentences won't start with one of these types of words. We'll talk about that at a later date as well. I could have just rearranged that sentence and avoided the use of a comma altogether. I adopted a kitten after I toured the animal shelter. But we want to have variety in our sentences so that we don't sound robotic. And to add a little bit of style or flair, we can rearrange sentences. And we do that naturally anyway. If I was going to say, before I get to this point, let me introduce this new person who's working here. I could have just said, I'd like to introduce this new person before we go on to further business. We do that all the time. Before I sit down to supper, I'm just going to run up and wash my hands. We do that. Number 5, use a comma to separate the person addressed from what is said. This is really common also. I might say to one of my students, Victor, can you run down to the office for me and get extra staples? So our example here, Raj, are you listening to me? I want to get Raj's attention. Raj, but that's separate from my question. Are you listening to me? Or if I'm speaking and I want to add a little bit of information, I have to separate that person's name from the information. My physician, Dr. Elizabeth Tanner, I might have a couple of doctors. Maybe I have a dermatologist, maybe someone looks after my feet, or maybe I have a chiropractor. So I have to let you know which doctor I'm speaking of. My physician, Dr. Elizabeth Tanner, is a specialist in dermatology. Number 6, use a comma to separate introductory words or interjections or interruption information. I am really guilty of this. You've heard of people that might go in different tangents or different directions when they're talking. We all do it. And it would all, if it was written on paper, be separated by commas. Yes, that was exactly what I was thinking. Well, I've said yes. Oh, I love your idea. Yes. And it's separate. That is exactly what I was thinking. I also want to go to lunch at 12:30. I've put it together and I need that comma. Oh, yum, this is delicious. Or, ew, I don't like that at all. All those little phrases or things that are coming out that go with a sentence, but they're more emotional, like yum or ew or gross or whatever it is you're going to put. Yes, no, don't do that. They all need to just be separated by commas. Of course, we all have to help with the group project. course, the statement is, look, I just did it there. The statement is, we all have to help with the group project. It is a group project. We are all responsible for it. But I added, of course, we all have to help with the group project. Of course, that's how I get from point A to point B. What was I thinking? I know much about science. However, my father is the expert. I didn't need a however in there. I could have had two separate sentences, but because of style and I want to make a complex sentence, I've put a however in there and they need to be separated. I know much about science. However, my father is the expert. That however needs commas. So I've given just those 6. There are plenty more. If I was going to be doing a creative writing course, we would be talking about dialogue, and we would have all the ways that you use commas when you're using quotation marks, and there's commas that you might need to use to separate different elements in, like, let's say the date. It is February 1st, comma, 2023, or an address. I live at 23 East Boulevard, comma, Moncton, comma, New Brunswick. But I'm pretty sure most of you know those and they're fairly natural to you. So we'll focus on these ones that are a little bit more nitpicky that you may be unfamiliar with. And then we'll do some practice activities as well. All right. I hope you have fun with the commas.